And we're recording, so Scott, go ahead.
All right, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Alan Montague. He is our Zoom god for NorCal SBDC. So thank you very much. Thanks for setting this up. Good morning, everyone. This is Northern California SBDC, Small Business Development Center's CARES Update, live Q&A. And this is, oddly enough, there's got a bunch of 20s here. This is our session 20 on May 20th, which is kind of cool. Sorry, and we're all into this together. All right, sorry, apologize. All right, so quick introduction. So NorCal SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, we're supported by SBA, Small Business Administration, and also the state of California, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, which is called GoBiz. And because we are federally and state funded, we come to you at no cost for small business owners and organizations. So if you need assistance, there's no cost for one-on-one advising, for counseling. Most of the workshops that we do and the webinars and the educational events are at no cost as well. And for Northern California SBDC, we cover the most northern 38 counties of the state. So we go from the Oregon border down the coast to Santa Cruz. We cover all 9 counties of the Bay Area. Southeast is Stockton, then back up through Nevada border and the Oregon border. At the Finance Center, we specialize in helping business owners access capital. And before COVID, that was for startups, expansions, buying buildings, buying equipment, a lot of working capital. But during COVID, it's been mostly around understanding and dissecting what the PPP is, what the EIDL is, the loans, and then the other loans that are also available that you may or may not know exist. My name is Scott Rogowski. I'm the director of Northern California SBDC Finance Center. I also have Sunita Maharaj. She's the associate director of the Finance Center. She's going to be answering some of the Q&A as I speak for the next 15, 20 minutes. And then at the end, after I'm done with this presentation, I have to jump off and go to another call. But Sunita and David Franklin and Alan are here for you until noon or until we answer all the questions to help you navigate what you need for your business. So quick agenda. So there's a disclaimer that we always read. We'll get to that. There's the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program loan. There's finding PPP lenders. There is also lots of money available, about $100 billion for PPP money. Hopefully we'll have SBA on the call today. We're not sure, but if they do join, that would be great. We'll get some updates from SBA. We'll talk about the EIDL loan a little bit, the state guaranteed loans that you may or may not be aware of. NorCal SBDC, we're partnering with some attorneys to help answer questions around the PUA and the PUI, and then also some other stuff. And then there's this 11-page document or a guide that came out Friday night, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. There's a precursor to Friday's call, which is we're gonna have a CPA on the call to better assist business owners with their record keeping. We'll hopefully get an SBA update if they show, and then we'll go to our contact info. So as a disclaimer, things are changing all the time. This information was correct when we put the presentation together, but things are changing all the time. If you are hesitant for whatever reason to apply for EIDL when it goes live again, it's not live for all businesses as we know it, or if you're hesitant to apply for PPP, we recommend that you do not hesitate to apply at all. And if you're not sure how to do that, we're here for you. We can do that for you at no cost and help you fill out the applications. If you do have in your ownership structure, if you have a lot of investors or partners, I would recommend that you reach out to them first and say, hey, I'm thinking about taking this money. You know, maybe they may or may not want you to take that money. We do not have access to check the status of your SBA EIDL loan, but we have resources that can kind of help you get there. We ask that you be patient with us and patient with SBA. If you were in the queue, meaning you applied after March 29th, and then when the web portal shut down for SBA in the middle of April, if you're in the queue, they are going to get to you. Just need to be patient. We've heard of a lot of fundings last week. We're hearing of fundings this week for the EIDL, whether it be the advance or the actual loan. And then if you apply for a PPP loan, you haven't heard back from your lender, you need to be very proactive and reach out to them, possibly go to the office and talk to them to figure out if you have a SBA loan number. All right, so the PPP is a 1% loan. It's for 2 years. There is a 6-month payment deferment. So if any of the part that was lent to you and you were not able to get it forgiven, it would be an 18-month loan, because you don't have to make a payment for the first 6 months. And then the total loan would be an 18-month loan, but at 1%, not too bad. There's a universal form that you can apply online. If you have not already applied, we can help you get that if you're having trouble finding it. For sole proprietors, you need to get together all your 2019 1099s. You either need to have your 2019 Schedule C filed or drafted, and if you do not, they are accepting your 2018. Other entities out besides the sole proprietor, you need to gather your 2019 W-2s, 941s, which is your quarterly payroll reports. So for the PPP, the 8 weeks start the day you get funded, or the 8 weeks start a week after the day you get funded, depending on when your payroll cycle is, and if you pay bi-weekly or you have a more progressive type of accounting system for your payroll, meaning it's seasonal or it's a little bit aggressive on the processing of it. Your start date might be covered by a week from the time you get funded. So we're gonna kind of go over that a little bit later, but so what's forgivable? So 75 to 100% could be spent on payroll costs, or you could spend 25% or less on rent, utilities, and interest mortgage payments. So utilities has been extended to gas, electricity, and some other types of fees, other types of services that we haven't talked about before, like transportation, but we don't have the actual guidance on what transportation means. I know a lot of you are probably gonna ask that question today, but we just do not have the guidance on that, unfortunately. So Schedule C, we had some information in here for Schedule K previously, but we're checking that and seeing if it's correct. So we kind of took it out. It was box 14, but we've had some issues with that. So we kind of just took it out real quick. But for Schedule C, for those of you that are 1099s, sole proprietors, figure out how to calculate your loan amount and how to calculate your total forgiveness is you take your line 31, which is your profit or loss, you divide it by 12, multiply it by 2.5, and that will give you your loan amount. And for your forgiveness, you take the same number divided by 52 weeks, times it by 8 weeks, which is the forgivable period from what you get. So as a sole proprietor, the most that you could pay yourself that is 100% forgiven is $15,385, which is 8 weeks. It does look like we have Noah Brode from SBA San Francisco district office. So SBA made the call. Thank you, Noah. We'll get to SBA's update soon. So we will help you find PPP lenders. We understand that a lot of the big banks are potentially at capacity. Some of your smaller banks may also be at capacity, but we're here to help you find PPP lenders. You can go to sba.gov/paycheck-protections/find, type in the zip code, and you can potentially find some lenders around you if you're having trouble. Or you could go to this list that we have here. We've vetted these lenders out personally, and we know what they're capable of. So there's a nonprofit lender, So these lenders below here, there's one nonprofit lender and then a couple regular lenders, or sorry, regular banks. And they are offering these PPP loans for non-customers. You don't have to bank with them or have a loan with them, up to $2 million. So Lendistry, and then also Gateway Bank, FSB, and then Pacific Enterprise Bank. Excuse me. Then also there's a lot of non-federally regulated PPP lenders, and also aggregate broker lender, like fintech, financial technology platforms like Blue Vine Capital. So Blue Vine Capital partners with hundreds of lenders across the country that offer PPP financing. If you apply with them, they get back to you within a day or two. It's very quick. It's one of the most reliable lenders or lending platforms that we have on this list here. So that's Blue Vine Capital. They don't actually do the lending directly, but they'll help you find a lender at no cost. Then there's Opportunity Fund, which is out of San Francisco. They lend throughout the whole state of California. And what they do is they're a direct lender, and they'll lend to you up to $150,000. Also the great thing about them is they'll lend if you need a loan under $10,000 or $25,000, because it's hard to get some of those smaller PPP loans from regular lenders. They only want to do 50 grand or more. So Opportunity Fund's a great option for that. So that's the PPP. The EIDL, unless Noah says otherwise right now, the EIDL is only open for agricultural businesses at this time. Is that right, Noah?
Yep, that's correct. We're still only open. Well, if you have to reapply to the economic injury disaster loan, so if you had an application number that started with 2 and you haven't yet reapplied, or you applied before March 29th and you haven't yet reapplied, you can also put a new application in through there. But those are the only 2 situations in which you can apply for an economic injury disaster loan as a new applicant right now.
Okay, thank you, Noah. Okay, so the economic injury disaster loan, also known as EIDL, this is the loan portion, not the advance. The advance is 100% forgivable. You will receive the advance just miraculously in your bank account, your business bank account, or the account and routing number that you gave when you applied. The advance will just show up one day. They won't text you, call you, email you, or anything. It'll just show up as a wire, kind of like a paycheck that will get directly deposited into your business account. It'll say SBA and then D for disaster, and that's your EIDL. And that's $1,000 for every employee that you have, up to 10. So $1,000 for a sole proprietor, $10,000 for somebody that has 10 or more employees. So the EIDL loan is a 30-year loan. The actual loan portion is a 30-year loan at 3.75% for a for-profit, 2.75% for a nonprofit. There is a 11 months deferment on the payment. You don't have to make your first payment until the first of the 12th month. Interest does accrue during that time, but it is a great loan and term at 30 years at 3.75%. You may or may not need some of these forms down here when you're applying. If you are not sure what these are, we can help you. We have access to these forms. We can help you fill them out. We can talk you through it and work with you at no cost. All right, so we went over PPP, we went over EIDL. Now we're going to go over the California State disaster loan options. So so for those of you that have been with us on these webinars, this is our 20th webinar. For those of you that have been with us, you've heard us talk about these loans over and over and over again. The state of California, for the whole state, has only done about $3 million in loans for these loans in the state, which is very, very little, as we all know. So we show this to you because it is available. We do have access to these lenders that offer this loan. This loan doesn't come directly from the state of California. It comes from lenders, just like PPP lenders. but the only way you qualify for this loan, which is what makes it very tricky, is you have to be disqualified for an EIDL and a triple P. And some of you may know, you may not even have to apply to know that you are disqualified if you're a 501c6, you don't have a US ID, you don't have any payroll, you're delinquent on some federal loans, or you just have really bad credit issues. You may just know that it's not going to work out for you. So then you would potentially qualify for either a microloan up to 50 grand or $1 million loan for larger businesses. These loans go through financial development corporations. There's 2 in our network in Northern California. There's 7 in the state, but 2 in our network. There's one in Oakland called NorCal FDC. You can email Chris Horton. He's one of our financial advisors. You can email him if you're in the Bay Area or Solano South and you need access to these loans. If you are in the Sacramento region and north, you can reach out to us at loans@asksbdc.com. And we work with a company organization, FDC, called California Capital. Debbie Miramoto is the CEO. She does great work with her team. So if you're looking for a loan and you're in the Sacramento region or north, we can assist you with that. Just email us and we'll get you connected. So NorCal SBDC, we joined forces with an attorney coalition called Case Force. And they are answering questions that we are not able to really answer regarding EDD questions, payroll questions, PUA, PUI, all those great questions that a lot of you have that we can't answer. You should join us tomorrow at 4 p.m. It's open office hours. It's pro bono. There's attorneys that are given their time to answer these difficult, tough questions for you. Okay, so on Friday, we have a CPA, certified public accountant, that is going to be presenting with us on Friday, and her name is Michelle Elder, and you can see a little bit about her on this screen. She's has an amazing amount of experience, over 30 years, and she does amazing work with her clients, and she's gonna talk to you about how to do really good record keeping for PPP. I'm not sure, Sunita, has she created like a worksheet for this, or?
Yes, so she will have an Excel worksheet and then also show you, if you're using QuickBooks, what you should have on your QuickBooks. Michelle is a great resource. I apologize, I do see some misspellings here. I was trying to do this very quickly right before the webinar, and I apologize for that. Michelle, if you're watching, or anybody else that knows Michelle, and everybody that's viewing this right now, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so she's going to go over all of that, best practices. She won't necessarily go through the application page by page. We will do that only because, as we know, this changes, things have changed a lot, and I bet they will continue to change just from past history of the other applications. And once we get more of a finalized version, then we will go more in depth on the application. But at least right now on Friday, we can show you best practices of what to get together to help with the forgiveness piece.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're not going to go over the 11-page guide for Triple P, the forgiveness guide in the application. We're not going to go over it today. We tried to do that Monday, and some of the stuff was a little bit blurry. If you have questions about this 11-page guide, please reach out to us. You can call our number 833-ASK-SBDC, or you can email us at loans@asksbdc.com. and we can assist you, but we are going to answer questions today, so I'm sure we'll get to that. For an SBA update, this is really quick right here, but Alan or Sunita, I'm going to have to ask you, one of you, to share your screen of this, because I do have to jump off. I apologize, but I will, at this time, I'll pass it over to Noah. So Noah Brode from San Francisco SBA District Office. He hopefully may or may not have some updates for you today?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So, few updates, just mostly in terms of some reporting items. We have released, we regularly release reporting of kind of where we stand in terms of the number of loans issued and the amount of approved financing that's been issued. So under the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the questions we often get is whether there is still funding available under that program to apply for. As of a few days ago, we had approved $200 billion under what I believe was, I think it was $350 billion available in the second phase of funding for the Paycheck Protection Program. So there's still a significant amount of funding available for applicants to be taking advantage of under the Paycheck Protection Program. The other update is that with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, significant number of questions about timelines and where a specific applicant may be with their application that they put in. What I can say is that that office, our Office of Disaster Assistance, which received all the applications nationally, they received millions of applications for economic injury disaster loans and are working through them as fast as they can. And that there's also been a really significant increase in the number of disbursements, approvals, and applications processed this month. It's ramped up significantly. Our local district office can't give status updates on an economic injury disaster loan application. If you do have, if you're running into issues with that office, whether it is a specific communication that is preventing you from accepting a loan offer or miscommunications, please do reach out to our district office. We've built out a system for escalating and elevating troubleshooting issues as they arise with that program. It's not as much a process for status updates, but we're able to do that to a little bit. So that's we are able to do that now out of our local district office. And then Scott talked about the loan forgiveness application, which was released last Friday. I think there was a link to it that was put in the chat. I'm not going to go through all 11 pages either for two reasons. One is we're still awaiting regulations that are going to be issued to accompany that forgiveness process. And up and until those rules and regulations are issued, we're generally not going to comment or give a lot of broad context or really speak to anything that's out of the four corners of what's in that application that's been pushed into the Treasury website. The hope and anticipation is that the rules and regulations around the forgiveness steps come out, very soon, maybe this week or next week. The other item that is kind of tied in with that as well is there's a lot of questions right now around regulatory changes. So the next phase, I think they're calling it phase 4 of stimulus funding. There's a lot of headlines being written right now around what's happening in Congress and what's happening in the House. And the short answer that I can offer from a local district office perspective of the U.S. Small Business Administration is that up and until a law is passed and signed into law by the president, we can't really comment on any pending legislation. So most of the headlines that individuals may be seeing right now about changes to a Paycheck Protection Program, those are really headlines about proposals that are in negotiation and being discussed. They're not actually real, or they're not actually being implemented up until they get put into a law that is voted upon, passed, signed into law by the president, and then implemented as a rule under the by our administration. So that's just to kind of give some context around what people may be seeing in headlines right now. I think that's just all of my updates.
Thank you. Sunita, I think we're on to Q&A now. So do you want to
Yeah, I can go ahead and start it. We're going to do our best, everyone, just because we usually have more panelists. So we're going to do our best to answer all these questions. So we have one here. Are there any helpful videos we can share with employees to prepare for returning safely to the office in the COVID area? That is a great question. And at this point in time, I don't have one. I can reach out to Shauna, who is our HR person, and see if there is anything online that she would recommend. The other thing is you can go on to the California website and see if there's anything that they are offering there. We don't have anything at this point with the SBDC that I know of, but I will reach out to Shauna in regards to this question. I just need to make myself a quick note to make sure that I will remember.
Okay. So while you're doing that, Sunita, let me throw the next one at you that's got a lot of votes. So this will around keeping a good record for expenses. This person says we charge a credit card for business expenses before we receive the PPP funds, but the credit card will be paid in a few days within the 8-week period. Are these expenses that can be included in the PPP expenses? Thank you.
Another great question. From what I read, it's supposed to be expenses that are incurred during those 8 weeks. A credit card payment is not a correct use of funds. It would be for EIDL, the payment, but it doesn't appear to be for the PPP.
Right.
That's correct. Yeah, that aligns with all the guidance that we have.
So that was that one. So now there's going to be several questions that we may not be able to answer because they're going to be reliant on the guidance that we're expecting. But this is one. This may well be maybe one of them. So how do you calculate the FTE? If majority of employees are part-time, can you reduce the total number of employees but maintain the number of FTE by increasing hours for part-time employees?
You know, it really depends on how you applied. So you should look at your application with the lender and see how many full-time employees you had there. So, you know, SBA is being pretty good about anyone under 40 hours is considered half. So it's half an employee. It's not, you know, if they work 10 hours, they're considered whatever that, you know, would be. They're actually going to be a half an employee. We would need more information than just what's on this question as well, but that's kind of the short answer. You can use them as half.
Okay, and if at any point you're not really clear about the answers you get here, I would suggest, rather than trying to throw something in chat, because I can't respond to it in chat because I'm helping here, but send an email to AskSBDC, to loans@asksbdc.com, or give them a call after their session on 833-ASK-SBDC, where we can ask you to drill down questions around your specifics as well.
Yeah. The form, you know, that was released on Friday has two methods that it lays out for calculating FTE. And the one that Sunita mentioned is the simplest one. That's the simplified method. So yeah, any employee that worked 40 hours or more is one, and anybody who worked, you know, fewer than that is half. The other method is you enter the average number of hours paid per week, you divide it by 40 and round the total to the nearest tenth.
Okay. One that I can actually answer, which is pretty amazing. When is the class for Michelle on Friday? Oh, it's disappeared. But that is this same bat channel, same bat time. So 10:30 a.m. On Friday morning in the same registration as you've come to here. So this is a great question, which is, I think I know the answer is actually kind of off, which was, oh, it's disappeared. Who at SBA will I contact to get my SBA PPP loan number? That info is required on the PPP forgiveness application. My lender Chase isn't getting back to me about this.
Mm-hmm. So if it's for the purposes of submitting the forgiveness application form, my advice is to actually wait, because ultimately you're going to be having to submit this form to your lender, and they may want to do it. They may be taking this form that we've released, the PDF version, and implementing it through their own website platform, and it might be, it might end up looking different, even if the questions are asked the same. It might end up being, looking different, with your particular lender. And most lenders haven't yet opened up and started accepting applications for forgiveness, because this form was just released last Friday. If you run into issues where you can't find any information whatsoever about your loan, please feel free to reach out to our local district office, and we're able, in some cases, to troubleshoot and kind of reconnect business owners with their lenders, or also provide some basic information about those loans as well.
Okay. And Noah, you put something in chat. Could you put it in for so it goes to everybody rather than just the panelists? Because that's something that you want to share.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the quote from the form.
Yeah. So a quick question around, can warehouse rent be included in forgivable rent?
If that's where your business is located, in a warehouse, then yes.
If there's a retail front end and a warehouse at the back, could you, are both eligible, do you know? Forgivable?
If that's where their business is located, then yes.
Okay. All righty. Next question up on with the high votes: is workers' comp and E&O insurance included in the PPP or the EIDL loan? Well, that's two different questions. So,
Workers' comp is not included in the PPP. I'm sorry, I don't know what E&O insurance is. I apologize for that. But if you want to put it in the chat, and I can check really quick to see what that is. EIDL, you can't, of course, you can't use the funds at the same time for the same things. So if you end up paying payroll out of EIDL after you've used up the PPP, then you can use it for operating costs. Is that correct, Noah?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
E&O is there as an emissions insurance.
I don't believe you can use the PPP funds for that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the sort of thing you would. Oh, there's a long one. I'm going to actually. You know what,
Alan? I was going to say I'm not going to be able. I did try to read this. There's so many different questions that they'll have to put it into the Ask SBDC loans.
Yeah.
And then it'll get forwarded, so we have more time to be able to look and see exactly what they're asking.
Okay, so there's one that's probably useful around here around, so it's a sole proprietor who takes a draw. If they've got a PPP loan and they use it completely for rent, utilities, and other operating costs, does this just mean it's not forgivable? And also there's an ask for clarification around the 8-week spending period.
So they just to clarify on that, they said they were going to use all of the loan that they received towards those other categories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then that means it's going to be a loan. Yeah. So we have that 75%, 25%, breakdown. The way it works is if you use 100% towards payroll, that basically it's at least 75%, can be more towards payroll costs, and up to 25% in those other categories where you'll still be able to receive forgiveness. So you can use up to 25% on rent, interest payments, or utility costs, and still qualify for forgiveness just fine. But if you don't, if you go put everything in that other category, it's going to turn into a loan.
Okay. So let me clear that one. So this is from one of our advisors down in Santa Cruz, who's getting.
Alan, can we go to Bridget, please?
Absolutely.
Because unfortunately, that one we just can't answer. Joy, I do want to let you know that we will try and get out additional webinars for HR, and maybe we can talk to you also and see if there's something that you would like to put on. We can talk about that as a side note, though. But appreciate it.
Okay. So the next one is Bridget's. Are there going to be any changes coming for PPP forgiveness? I think we can be answering is certainly, almost certainly. I'm hearing things that are coming. They won't hold to the 8-week requirement. They won't hold to 75%. Things like that. Are we hearing this? And I think, Noah, I'll let you give the official answer on this one.
The official answer is yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
It is all three of those up and until legislation passes and changes are made or are not made. It's a program that came into existence through Congress, and Congress writes all the rules, and they can rewrite all the rules if they want. But up and until those changes are official, the program is what it is today.
Okay.
So I can't really speculate about the future.
Yeah. There's someone says they heard back from EIDL. They've only been offered $1,200, but it costs them over $40,000 a month to run their business. Is it possible it's a typo, the decibel's off? How would they determine how much of a loan comes from EIDL?
So the Office of Disaster Assistance makes the determination. If it was for prior disasters, I'd say, well, there's a starting place calculation that they use that looks at your COGS and at your revenues. If you think there was a mistake in that calculation, you're welcome to reach out to our district office, and we can loop the Office of Disaster Assistance into that conversation.
Okay, and could you throw your
I'll type it in.
Out there on the chat so people can do that?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of really covers the same answer to the question that Kim asked, which is, can I ask to add more to my EIDL loan? If so, how? And that would be the same thing. Reach out to the Office of Disaster Assistance. Okay, so from Martin, my company paid bonuses to employees in 2019 at the end of the year. Can I pay an allocated bonus to my employees during the 8-week period and obtain forgiveness?
So the form that was released on Friday has provisions for reducing how much forgiveness that you receive based on salary reductions or reductions in cash compensation that are paid to employees. It does not include anything that would reduce the amount of forgiveness you're eligible to for salary increases or other forms of cash compensation increases. Aside from having that existing cap, so no cash compensation over $100,000 on an annualized basis is considered under the PPP.
Okay. So someone's asking us to go through what is now known about forgiveness, about their forgiveness application. I'm going to suggest you have a look on the video from from Monday, which you can have a look under asksbdc.com and the resources page where we went through it. It took about 20 minutes to go through it. So have a look there. That is still current in terms of we haven't had anything more in the way of an update. So I would suggest rather than us go through that now, have a look at that.
Yeah, I would just add on to that it's you know, the application which came out on Friday, there may, yeah, the instinct is to like go straight to the application and learn everything about it as soon as possible. But with an evolving program that's changing pretty frequently, sometimes it is, you know, it's better to slowly approach documents as they get released, you know, in case revisions or changes come out. But the, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's just a broader approach towards, you know, whether you want to go and do a line by line tutorial of a form. Yeah, the SBDC, you know, I think can and should do that eventually, but it's maybe a good and prudent approach to wait and make sure that you're looking at a form that's not going to change dramatically.
And that's why we haven't at this point in time, because we do believe that this, you know, will change. So we highlighted areas, and you can see on the webinar from Monday in the afternoon exactly what we highlighted and went over. But we didn't want to go line by line because we do have a feeling that it will change again.
So Christine says she received a PPP loan. Forgiveness application is heavy in full-time language. She doesn't have any full-time employees. So if she pays the part-timers, will they be forgiven? Or will it be forgiven?
I believe if that's how you applied, then it should be. I mean, that's kind of how it's, you know, say, but if you stated on your application to the lender that you had 6 full-time employees, they're going to expect to see 6 full-time employees come back. But if it was half-time or part-time, then they won't necessarily look for that. So like I said, with the other person, it's hard to determine if we don't see your application and look at it and review what was stated in the first place.
I'd say also that with the forgiveness application, it's driven by FTEs, by full-time equivalents, not necessarily headcounts. So, and both the reference period, you know, your prior, you know, period and afterwards, like it's looking at, yeah, full-time equivalents. So if you have 3, you know, before the disaster, you had 3, you know, FTEs of, you know, that, you know, if you had a number of half-time employees that added up to 3, and afterwards you have another set of half-time employees that added up to 3, that's how you would look at that calculation, not necessarily on a head count basis.
Okay. So just a quick note, we are only handling questions in the Q&A. Don't put anything in chat because at this point there's no one able to monitor the chat. Whatever you're putting in chat is pretty much being ignored right now. So please put your questions in Q&A. Also, alternatively, if you want to actually talk to somebody, you can call 833-ASK-SBDC or send an email to loans@asksbdc.com as well. We've got one about how home offices are handled in terms of the forgiveness part of that. So it's my business operates out of my home office. Does the business portion of our utility bills and mortgage, which is the interest and principal, qualify as part of forgivable expenses under PPP for rent and utilities? These are written off as part of taxes, and they plan on using the same ratio that they would use for utility costs against that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, in that case, that, you know, when I've spoken with business owners about this, in terms of the documentation of it, you know, your lender will likely want to see that in the past that you had already claimed that space as business expenses, so that you have some history of you know, that verifies that it is a business expense, and that you had been treating it as such in the past. But yeah, the answer is yes.
So the next question, so it's a great one. If they received an EIDL advance but were then denied for an EIDL loan, are they eligible to apply for the California State Guaranteed Disaster Loan if they're also denied on PPP? Or does the EIDL advance itself disqualify them?
No, the EIDL advance does not disqualify you at all. So yes, if you have your documentation showing that you did not receive or were disqualified or declined for PPP and EIDL, then yes, please give us a call. If you're not already a client, or contact your advisor, and then we can start collecting all of your documents. So that way we can try and get you a loan through one of the other lenders that are doing loans right now. Depends on if it's a micro loan or if it's a larger loan. The other thing is, why were you disqualified? So we need to know specifically why that is. And I believe the letters do state that. So reach out to us if you're not a client yet, and we will match you up with somebody.
Okay. There's a question around some things that are on subscription. So are monthly computer services such as Comcast or proprietary accounting software considered in the same class as gas, electricity, etc.? They count as utilities. Any idea?
If you're talking about internet, then yes. But if you're talking about a subscription for QuickBooks or things like that, then no, it can't be paid with PPP. It can be paid with EIDL, but not with PPP. A subscription is not considered a utility.
Since we've now learned that payroll earned within the 8-week period, even if it's not paid yet, can be forgivable, what about payroll that was earned before the 8 weeks started, but was paid during the 8 weeks?
The expenses that were incurred or paid out during that 8-week period. So I think maybe, the premise of the question may have.
Yeah, there's kind of an 8-week floating window, isn't there? Or not so much floating. You can either choose the immediate 8 weeks or the 8 weeks that aligns with your payroll. And so if you choose one, if you choose the early one, then if you've got payroll from before that was paid on that date, then you will end up kind of losing some of it at the end, but it compensates.
On that piece, if you paid prior, we don't know if that portion is forgivable or not, because it's not clear. It is clear that you can incur it and then you can pay it, the first part, but the last part, if it was, I got my money today and then I'm paying payroll for last week and this week at the end of the week, I don't know if the portion before that is forgivable or not. So unfortunately, I don't have a, for sure answer on that. It's still a bit gray.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that you're right. That is a gray area about whether that section counts. The area that is very clear is any costs that are incurred or paid out during that 8-week period do qualify. And anything outside of it is question marks. Yeah.
Okay. Single owner LLC. Can we use PPP funds for our own salary? It would not show on the 940 or 941 because the owner is not on payroll with the rest of the staff. How can the owner's draw be best documented to be forgiven?
We can go over that question. Please provide it again on Friday. It's going to be best practices for everyone, even for single owners. Documentation is going to be key. If you show yourself from the business, paying yourself, then that's probably a great way to show it. But our CPA expert will give us more information on Friday.
Okay. Something says your slide implies for all PPP applicants, including sole props, can have 75 to 100% of payroll forgiven and not more than 25% of rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. Then when you present the sole prop forgiven calculation on Schedule C line 31, net income times 50 times 8, which is less than 75% maximum forgiveness. Why are sole props being treated differently? That's
that's also a great question.
Yeah. So in the interim, final rulings that were issued by the SBA and the Treasury, the treatment of sole proprietors, slightly differently under this program, was a decision made at the discretion of the administrator in consultation with the Treasury. So that's kind of the answer is that the administrator of the SBA in consultation with the Treasury decided to do that. Some of it was to, that they have some reasoning in the interim filing rule that was released under the Treasury documents, but that's kind of the answer that was issued.
okay. Should we prorate rent and utilities if we get PPP funds in the middle of a payment cycle? That's a nice one. Any thoughts?
So on the form that was released, there is a, for payroll or for non-payroll expenses, there is a, that 8-week period can float a little bit more for those expenses that might not perfectly fit on that 8-week period. Let's see, I think I can point you towards it.
Page 2 at the bottom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so page 2 at the bottom, it talks about eligible non-payroll costs and some of the time periods you can use for those. Generally it says those payroll costs have to be paid during the covered period, so that 8-week period, or before the next regular billing date, even if the billing date is after the covered period.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can, did you already erase or tick that off? If you didn't, then I can put it. It's at the bottom of page 2 under eligible non-payroll costs. It's the second paragraph. And I can put it in the chat.
I'll put quickly both this deck and the forgiveness piece. They're both now quickly in the chat, where you can download them. There's a question: what can the EIDL loan be used and not used for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So EIDL loans have a pretty broad set of usage, much broader than the Paycheck Protection Program. So almost any working capital business need is what the economic injury disaster loan can be used for. It can be used for fixed expenses, rent, payroll, accounts payable, any extraordinary payments or expenses that you might have because of the shelter-in-place orders or because of how you're having to adapt because of the disaster, any interest payments. So those are all things that you can use those funds for. There's just a few things you can't use them towards. You can't use them to completely refinance any long-term debt. You can't use them for tax penalty payments or dividends or bonuses. And you can't use them towards non-business expenses as well.
Okay. So David said when we filled out our application for PPP, we used the number of employees from our 941. But now with better guidance on FTEs, how can we properly make our request for forgiveness based on the real FTEs and not the number of employees from our 941, which is much higher since it counts the number of people who were paid during the quarter, not the FTEs?
I would bring documentation to your lender showing that that's the correct information. That's the only thing that you can do, and just let them know that the 941s didn't have the correct information on there, but you need to have some document that's pretty clear during that time period to be able to, for them to look through it and figure out what the forgiveness should be.
Okay. So Lisa's just asked a question which seems rather strange, but I think I have a suggestion for her. I just received a loan application for signature on a $3,400 loan at 3.75%, which makes no sense when we're being told idle less than 10K won't need to be repaid if it's used for payroll. Why don't the loan terms match accordingly? Please clarify.
So idle does need to be repaid. It's a loan. And they might be thinking about the $10,000 advance. So if you receive the advance, which is just a straight deposit, you don't have to even, sign on to loan terms or agree. It just goes straight into your bank account. That does not need to be paid back, and that can be up to $10,000. So I think they might be confusing the loan and the advance. So I think that's the clarification there.
Yeah. So let me just clear that one. Oh, I was about to ask one that's just got answered. We received our idle grant on 5/6. What has been the experience time frame wise to hear back from the SBA? And is this a phone call or an email? So what's that? What can they expect as the next steps and when?
Yeah, you generally receive an email. We don't have a fixed, estimated time from our Office of Disaster Assistance. Under prior disasters that were much, kind of different world, the average processing time for an economic injury disaster loan was, between 4 to 6 weeks. That was in non-COVID times for disaster loans. For this particular disaster, we don't have a timeline.
Okay. So I'm going to start picking a few that I think are more generally applicable. Someone was turned down for idle due to bad credit. Will the PPP turn them down for the same thing?
We, that's through a lender, so you would have to try with the lender. The only way you'll know is by applying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it differs from lender to lender.
Okay. We've had, this one's already been pretty good answered. Any guess when idle will reopen?
Yours is as good as mine.
Yeah. So we have several guesses, none of which are anything more than just a guess at this point.
Unfortunately, we don't know when it will reopen. But as soon as it does, and if it does, we will let you know.
If I give a hardship bonus to an employee, can this be considered as a payroll cost in terms of PPP forgiveness?
Yes, that's similar to the question that was asked a little bit earlier about bonuses. And what I can say about that is that the form that was released on Friday has no, the only forgiveness reduction calculation that's on that form relates to if you reduce the salary or reduce the hours of employees. There's no reduction calculation for bonuses or anything else outside of there being a cap of what you're allowed to claim for cash compensation towards any one employee, and that cap is $100,000. So you can't consider more than that amount for on an annualized basis for employees that are listed on that form.
So I like the look of this one. If someone's renting space in a data center to host the servers for their business, can PPP cover this? I have a lease agreement with the data center.
That's unlikely. No, that's not a utility cost for. Yeah, I've had similar questions with people pay cloud hosting services and service agreements. We don't have I think the hope is with the the regulations that are issued and the rulemaking that's issued under the forgiveness steps that we're waiting, there'll be more extensive clarification under what's meant by utility costs. But I think actually also that the forgiveness form talks about the delivery. I just want to check. Yeah, so business payments for a service for the distribution of electricity, gas, water, transportation, telephone, or internet access. So that's the language that's used in the forgiveness form.
Okay, thank you. So there's one from Elizabeth, says, I run payroll semi-monthly. The 1st to the 15th gets paid on the 20th. The 16th to the end of the month gets paid following month on the 5th. I was funded on April 14th. So at the end of the first period, what do you suggest I do? Should I run it every 2 weeks instead? Starting the payroll period as late as possible would be a huge help.
So for, yeah, that might be a kind of a question for the CPAs on Friday, about how they might want to approach that situation. Just to say on the form, it's that alternative payroll covered period really only applies to bars with the biweekly payroll. So you would just, your 8-week period starts on the day of disbursement.
Okay.
And you want to make expenses during that 8-week period, however you want to structure it. And the CPAs on Friday might have more of a strategy discussion around that. Maybe what would work best for business owners.
Okay. So I'd like to, we've got 100 questions or 99 questions still open. We've answered 58. And so I would really recommend you look through the open ones and upvote them. That's the best way of getting a question answered if there's anything close to yours. Can I take an owner's draw while having the PPP? I guess that question, the answer to this depends on whether the owner's draw was part of your original PPP calculation, yeah?
Can you ask that question? Or sorry.
Yeah, if it's part of line 31, that's how you received your money, then yes, you can. And the calculations for forgiveness are on a previous slide, which you can download the slide and get that information right off of there.
Yeah, so I'm looking for a good question. As a sole prop, can we use a contribution to an IRA as PPP forgivable if there's precedent for this?
So you can pay retirement to your employee. If it's to you and you're putting chunks of money into there, I don't know for sure.
This one's more of a comment, but it's got a lot of upvotes. So it's odd that the initial PPP application with the lender asked for the number of employees, and now its forgiveness application is using FTEs. Suggested ways to handle that?
I don't disagree with you. I will say that when you're walking through the calculations on the form that was released, it does ask for the employees that you listed at the time of the loan application, but the number of employees listed at the time of the loan application, that field itself isn't used in calculations later on for forgiveness reduction. I agree that there are different measures.
Yeah. And part of that maybe comes from what the lenders gave out originally, because they had this before the forgiveness information came. So this is one from one of our advisors. So it's around EIDL. So their client received notification of $150,000 approval began the online process of directing, logging in, signature ID, electronic disbursement info, was notified it was all in process, and then today the site says a $0 declined. Any advice for Marnie and his client?
So they were issued an approval and then a decline afterwards.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, please. I would encourage them to reach out to our district office at sfomail@sba.gov. We can maybe dig into that a little deeper.
Okay. I would. It's kind of hard to do this. I've got a lot of questions where like people have put in half a question and then put another half a question in, and we don't realize is that I don't see the first part next to the second part. So it's really hard for me to ask questions like that. Another one about FTEs or headcount there.
There's a question on here. Is it true PPP funds cannot be used for independent contractors? And that's correct. PPP funds, well, independent contractors those expenses aren't payroll costs, and they don't fall into the other category either. So they wouldn't be expenses that would count towards for forgiveness.
Okay. There was someone asking about how they log on to the CaseForce webinar. Is there a way to sign up for it? One thing I can tell you is there is no way to sign up for it. I'm just going to pop the information in the chat. You have to do that at the time when it's running. So that would be, I think it's 3 o'clock. Let me just scroll up wherever it is. It is 4 o'clock on Thursday. And you just put in that, go to that URL at 4 p.m. on Thursday and use that password. It's not something you can sign up for in advance.
I've got a question. As cattle ranchers, we have been approved for the EIDL loan. Have not signed final papers yet. Now the USDA is coming out with a coronavirus assistance program funding for ranchers. Can we apply for both? Noah, do you happen to know the answer to that one? Unfortunately, I don't know about the new loan through USDA.
Can you apply for the EIDL and the USDA loans is the question?
Yes.
So in this, yeah, I won't speculate about USDA's restrictions. So I would definitely check with USDA if they have any regulations on that program. Our existing programs don't. The EIDL and the PPP, they're not going to ask you if you receive funding under the USDA program. I can't say that much. And the general principle that's at play with any benefits that are received through a federal source is that you can't receive the same benefits for the same purpose for the same time period. So you can't double dip and receive assistance for multiple things all at the same time. So in some cases, if it's for instance with the Paycheck Protection Program, that's for salary, use that for salary during one time period. In the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, that's for other expenses and or for payroll costs not covered during the time period that you're paying Paycheck Protection Program funds. That's just the general rule with any kind of federal assistance, that you want to ensure that the funds are going towards different purposes, and so long as you're staying within that, you're generally pretty good. But I can't speak towards whether or not the USDA loan programs have additional restrictions that they launched under, and I would encourage you to check with the USDA on that.
There was a question, can you give an employee a raise during the 8 weeks and then decrease their salary afterwards?
You should definitely talk to an HR specialist. If you're not a client already, please reach out. I am not an HR specialist. I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to do. If I'm channeling Shauna, I would say no, but that's just me channeling her and not knowing the correct answer to that. So I would definitely reach out to us and request some HR help.
Yeah.
Before you do that.
Paying it as a bonus or something, we know that can be up to 25% depending on circumstances, don't we? That's what we've seen.
Well, that you know, the 25% limitation on bonuses, that language, actually we don't have that. That wasn't on the forgiveness form. That might be included in the rules or regulations that come out eventually, but none of the existing documents put a 25% upper limit on increases in pay or bonuses. But which was something I think in some of the early language around the programs, there was language around limitations on pay raise increases or bonus increases, and I don't think any of the existing guidance that's been released or updated language has actually included that.
Okay, so here's a situation. Someone runs a photography firm for restaurants. Obviously, their work fell off to nothing. They filed taxes jointly with her husband and using her social security number. Will she qualify for the PPP? And would it be okay to use a joint return, or does she need to have one specifically for her business? I'm feeling this would be kind of Schedule C stuff, wouldn't it, Sunita?
Yes, it's Schedule C. Sorry, I'm looking for the question. I didn't hear it all because I'm trying to answer questions as well on this.
It was
so it would be particularly, yes, if you're the business owner, I mean, the income shouldn't be muddled. So it should be just from you, but talk to your lender and see what they say, because they would be the ones to approve your deal or not.
Okay. So we are, like I said, there are fewer of us today than normal, so we are struggling to find good questions.
Thumbs up stuff in there, everyone, go in there, and if you see a question you like and you want us to answer it, go ahead and thumbs up it, and then it'll move it up to the top. So we have a lot of questions that definitely are the same, and some of them I'm just dismissing them or saying we've already answered the question.
So interest on credit cards. How far back can you go under PPP forgiveness? And I think this comes back to this question about things were being paid on a credit card. If the payment was part of that period, but is the interest maybe available?
Only interest on a mortgage can be paid from the documents that I've seen. I don't see anywhere else where there's other interest that is allowed. Mm-hmm. I know in the past it may have been said, and it's possibly because that's what was information that people had, but the information we have today on this forgiveness document application, it says mortgage interest.
Yep.
So here's one that's, I think, got a good question, which is, where's it gone? Oh yeah, if we're not concerned about the forgiveness of our PPP loan, do we have to use all the funds within the 8 weeks? And if not, what can those funds be used for? We're an inn that's closed, so has no employees working. We would rather use the funds when we open.
Yeah, if you don't pursue forgiveness, it turns into a loan, a business loan with 1% interest rate and a 2-year term. No prepayment penalties, and in terms of, and it should be used for business purposes. There's been some, like whether they'll release additional guidance saying that they must be used towards payroll and future costs or something like that. But, the knowledge that we have right now is that it's just a regular business loan.
Can you please look at your note from your lender? They may be specific on exactly what you can and cannot use the loan for. If it's if you've received a business loan before, you know that there's stipulations. You can only be used for business purposes.
So this one's a business the business is a partnership. The partners receive salary through Schedule Ks. Can their partner's salary be included in the payroll that's forgiven?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Yes, it can.
Okay.
And there's, I can put it in the, in the chat. There's a link to how to calculate a loan amount for different types of business entities, and there's a section there specifically for partnerships and how to include those different partners in the calculation of your PPP loan size.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. If an employee resigned after February 15th, but before the covered period started for PPP, in this case, April the 15th, can their headcount be reduced for FTE calculation for safe harbor requirement? Or can we only count the employees that resigned during the covered period for safe harbor?
So any employee who you make an offer to, I guess, like the one answer to that is any employee that you make an offer to return to work, you make a job offer to that is the same hours and salary that they would have received earlier. If you make an offer to that employee and they turn it down, either because they have resigned or because they are earning more on unemployment or because they don't want to return back to work, so long as you document that, you can, that employee won't be held against you for purposes of calculating any of the forgiveness reductions. So I think that's kind of, for an employee that falls into that gray area, that's sort of the approach that I would take. Maybe even if they've already resigned, I would give them an offer for hire and have them turn it down. But I don't know if you have another question for, that also might be a good question for the HR specialist at the SBDC as well, how to approach that situation.
Okay, there's a couple of people asking questions around, do they get to see these Q&A threads? Our marketing team are continually looking at these and updating them and trying to update the Q&A on asksbdc.com. The challenge there, of course, is that the situation is changing all the time. So an answer to a question given a week ago or 2 weeks ago may no longer be consistent and correct. So we're having to keep, that's the challenge there. But we are, so there is no, say, transcript of these, but you can view previous recordings. So I'm going to dismiss those two. And so here's a sad one. What happens if I get no assistance for my storefront business? I don't qualify for PPE, for PPP. Do I just have to close my business that I've had for 8 years?
So we disqualified for the EIDL loan? That's really the question. And disqualified for PPP. If that is the case, then please reach out to us and then we will help get your loan package together to see if you'll qualify for one of these state guarantee loans. If you have decent credit, then we can also see if there's other loans that you can apply for. Of course, they may not be as low as the SBA loans, but it could be an option.
Okay. Self-employed and got a maximum loan of $20,832. No employees, but for themselves. So it's a sole prop. If the forgiveness application sets like approximately $15,000 cap, how do they get the $5,000 difference forgiven?
So that $5,000 difference for sole proprietors, and this is one of those ones where we may need further guidance on, but in the interim final rulings that were issued by the administrator, that extra $5,000 for those other categories wasn't included for sole proprietor applicants. So the options would be to either prepay back that loan with no penalty, that extra $5,000, or allow it to churn into a 1% loan with a 2-year term.
Okay. So Joyce says she noticed a form that needs to be filled out for loan forgiveness from the SBA. Would that form automatically be provided by the lenders, or is it up to us?
I would say that it would be up to you as a business owner. Of course, this application is the one we're talking about for forgiveness. And, you know, you can review it. You can start getting the documents together. There is a list of documents. We are going to go over this on Friday as well. But the lender, I'm sure, will also provide this to you. But as the business owner, to be proactive, that's what I would do, because, you know, the lender may inadvertently not provide it to you.
Yeah, a bit of confusion over the EIDL. Someone says, must we repay the EIDL? I thought it was a grant.
The EIDL advance, which is the amount that is directly deposited into your bank account, does not need to be paid back. If you receive an invitation to a portal, a loan portal, where you will review a loan amount, accept it, sign some documents, that is a loan. So it's two, you know, the EIDL that you filled out in SBA, it's two things. One is the EIDL advance, which is an amount that is directly deposited in your bank account and does not need to be paid back. The other is a loan, which you're invited to accept. And when you accept it through that portal, that amount of money that is issued to you needs to be paid back. And it's a 3.75% interest rate with a 30-year term.
Thank you. And we've got about 5 minutes left, and there's still 70-something questions because I'm not as good at running this as Scott is. One thing I'm going to say, remind people, if you don't get an answer that you're looking for today, that's the best way to get those answers are an email to loans@asksbdc.com or call the 833-ASK-SBDC hotline number, where our recently expanded call center is available to with trained people who can answer these questions for you one-on-one. So Elizabeth says, if you need to use the safe harbor before June 30th date for your FTE, how many days do you have to have them employed before that to have them count as a 1.0 FTE?
I don't believe that's specified in the forgiveness document.
So, yeah, the answer is we don't know yet. Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, sorry about that. So this is around the, what are the personal guarantee and personal credit implications of taking an EIDL loan? What are the loan size thresholds for those guarantees or credit requirements?
Yeah, so the economic injury disaster loan requires a personal guarantee from anybody who receives that loan at any amount. So that's a, you know, there are no thresholds on the economic injury disaster loan for a personal guarantee. Collateral is only requested from an applicant if the loan is larger than $25,000. So we do ask for collateral above any loan of that size. And if collateral is not available, that won't be a reason for decline. We just take it if it's available.
Okay. Is there a minimum credit score on an EIDL?
Credit is a factor, but the Office of Disaster Assistance doesn't publish their specific credit score threshold. They also, you know, they're maybe looking at a different credit model than what would normally show up on your you know, they have their own, you know, method of doing credit evaluation, but it's not a published method, and they don't have a published threshold for what that benchmark is.
Okay. So here's an interesting one around use of funds for EIDL. So someone had to use $5,000 of their business line of credit to pay down their maxed out working capital Visa card. Can they use the EIDL to pay off the line of credit and the balance of the working capital Visa? And can they use the EIDL to pay the taxes in July?
So EIDL, it can't be used to refinance any long-term debt, but it can be used to make interest payments on any debt whatsoever. And if you had to take out a bridge loan to kind of, make it through this period, or if you have some short-term debts essentially that you've been accruing in order to get through the disaster period, you can use the EIDL loan to pay for those.
Okay.
But the expenses, that's really a question of, did you take out a bridge loan to meet the needs of the disaster or not?
All right. I'm showing it as just about to hit noon. So I'm going to finish this off. Thank you very much, Noah and Sunita, for answering so many questions. We got 96 answered, which I think is pretty good, bearing in mind how bad I was at asking them. So thank you very much. We'll be back again on Friday morning when we'll have our CPA support. Michelle will be with us giving focused questions for CPA, as well as any updates we've got on the various programs. Don't forget the Ask an Attorney is on Thursday. You can catch that tomorrow afternoon. And if you happen to be prefer to hear this whole thing done in Spanish, then you can do that tomorrow on our colleagues from the Hispanic Heritage Center are running one of these. So other than that, thank you very much, everybody. It's time for me to close down the event. Thank you. And
I'm going to answer one more question, Alan, to get 100. I'm going to answer one more question.
Then that's just fine. You go ahead and do that, Sunita. Do you need me to pick one for you?
Now, how can we find out where our loan applications are in the review process? You would email or call SBA.
Okay. All right. That's 100 questions answered. Well done there, Sunita.
Thank you. Noah, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yes. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks for your time,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.